Maria will be speaking to Rev Grace Thomas, one of the DEOs from Manchester Diocese and vicar at St James Moss Side.
Hello, hi, thank you, and hi Maria.
Hi everyone, and good afternoon.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today, Maria. You've zoomed in from Ecuador, and we managed to get the time difference right and everything, so we're good. So that's a good relief. Just to start off, Maria, would you like to just introduce yourself? Just tell us a bit about who you are, a little bit about your background.
Sure. So my name is Maria Alejandra Andrade. I come from Ecuador. I live currently in Ecuador. As it was said, I am a sociologist and theologian, and I am a Christian. So I feel that my identity is as a woman, as a Latin American, but also as a Christian. And in the last years, moving towards more awareness on creation care and climate justice, just as part of being a disciple. So as part of my discipleship journey. And part of that discovery also has brought me to be more curious, but also more aware about my indigenous identity, because if you remember, Latin Americans are a mix of indigenous peoples who live there, and then the Spanish who came 500 years ago. So we are all a mix, but we don't often realize and emphasize our indigenous roots. So part of my pilgrimage has also been to try to discover and embrace that indigenous identity that it's not always highlighted.
Thanks so much, Maria. And as has already been pointed out in the chat, it is just really great to have you with us today. It's really important that we view the climate emergency in the global context. So it's really great that you've come to us from South America, from Latin America. We will be having opportunity at the end of this little interview for people to ask you questions. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, do put them in the chat, and we'll try and keep up to date with those, and we'll ask some of those questions at the end. But Maria, it'd be really good to hear from you now, just to tell us what's going on in your context with regards to the climate emergency. What changes are you seeing with the climate, and how is it affecting people in Latin America?
Sure. So because we don't have too much time, I will be very concrete, but I can see 4 very concrete ways in which climate change is affecting our people in Latin America, especially the poorest people. So we see more floodings, we see more droughts, we see more hurricanes, but also the rising of the sea level. So the floodings and everything in general, they are more frequent, they are more violent, and they are more unexpected. So it's not that this didn't happen before, it's just that it's happening in many different ways. More violent, more frequent, and also more unpredicted. And the problem is, like it happened last year in the pandemic, I don't know if you were aware that in Central America, there were 2 hurricanes that hit one after the other. The problem with that is that people that are already in poverty they are still struggling to live, and now with COVID, just to survive. And many of them depend on the land. So when hurricanes or when floodings hit, they need some time to recover. But then there is another disaster that comes, so they don't even have the time to recover from the previous one, that then they need to face another one. So what we know about climate change is that actually the countries and the communities that are hit the hardest by the deadly and destructive effects of climate change are those who have done the least to cause it. And this is the reality in many countries and many people in Latin America. So their lands, their crops, their animals are often destroyed by these natural disasters. They are less able to plan their harvesting and planting seasons because the weather is just changing so much. So if they dependent on the seasons to seed, to prepare the land, then to get the crops, now it's more difficult to plan. So like a global number, not only in Latin America, the estimate is that around 100 million people are going to go into extreme poverty because of climate change.
Thanks, Maria. That really brings it home to us. Just the severity of what this climate change is doing across the globe. What do you think, Maria, the main issues are regarding the climate emergency in Latin America? What kind of issues have come up that you're aware of that you think are really important in when we're thinking about the climate emergency in Latin America?
Yeah, maybe the first thing that I would say is that I have the feeling that the discourse around climate change is seen as something new, as something that it's happening in the last decades or so. However, I believe that there is something about climate change that it's not current, it's also historic. It's historic, it's systemic, and it's complex. And because it's historic and systemic and complex, there are small actions that can be done, but the thing is bigger than that. So in the case of Latin America, and I would like to introduce and propose another way to call Latin America, which is Abya Yala means living land or mature land, and this is the way in which Latin America used to be called before the arrival of the conquerors. So what happens in Abya Yala in terms of climate change is historic. So there is something linked with colonization, because climate change is also linked to the destruction of the land. And in Latin America, the destruction of the land did not start in these decades. Actually, it started 500 years ago, when the land and also the people were exploited and were destroyed because of the extraction of many minerals. So the gold and the land, the amounts of gold and land and other minerals that were taken in the colonial times to bring to Europe and also to make possible industrial revolution were massive. Only in Potosi, in one city in Bolivia, which the historians say that it was so big and so rich, and they compared Potosi to cities like London or Paris in at that time. So by the 17th century, 16th, 17th century. So Potosi, from Cerro Rico, the rich mount, where it was taking so many tons of silver that historians say that they could build a bridge between Potosi and Spain, crossing the Atlantic. So Potosi today is the poorest city in the poor Bolivia. So these are part of the effects of what are there. So the destruction of the land is also linked to climate change. So in Latin America, I think that we need to bear this in mind, and also realize that destruction did not end when the countries became independent. Now there are other ways in which that extraction is still taking place, not only by the big companies, which also play a big role, but very painfully by the governments, because the governments are also giving permission and selling the lands to these big companies. So either by legal extraction, but also by illegal groups now linked to trafficking. This is something that is happening, and this is hugely contributing to climate change in Latin America. Just a final highlight on this: those who are defending and raising the voice to fight against this are those who are targeted and killed. So Latin America is now the most dangerous continent for an Earth defender. And ironically, this has increased after the signing of the Paris Agreement in 2015, which is very ironic. So on one side, we have one level advocacy where we are trying to move forward, but on the other side, those who are defending with their bodies and their bloods and their lives, they are being more targeted. Even this week, one indigenous leader from Colombia was killed, and it could have been by the government, by illegal groups, actually by big companies. We really don't know, and it seems that no one is really caring about that.
Thanks, Maria. I think the plight of climate defenders, I don't think we appreciate quite how dangerous it is sometimes to stand up and speak out in places and speak some of that truth to power. And the danger that involves is quite phenomenal, really. I know that you had a video that you'd like to share. Is this an appropriate time to share the video?
I think that it would be good. The video is from one case, because I am sharing with you very tough things, but in this very difficult situation and in the midst of lots of deaths, there are also seeds of hope. So this video is from a woman, an indigenous woman in Peru, who was close to the bigger mine. This is if you Google that, you will find about this mine, because it has been a huge fight. But this woman was just in those lands, and it's her fight, and it's her struggle, and it's her pain, but also her hope. So yeah, I think that it's a good moment to watch this video.
Thanks, Maria.
Esta laguna se llama la Laguna Azul. Hace más o menos 20 años.
This is Laguna Azul. I've lived near the lake for almost 20 years. I walk my sheep and other animals here. There is water everywhere here. It has always been like this. Our lakes provide water for the communities downstream.
In 1994, Maxima Acuna bought land and built a small home. That same year, just 10 miles away, Colorado's Newmont Mining Corporation opened the Yanacucha mine. It's Latin America's largest open-pit mine and one of the world's most profitable.
La empresa minera Yanacucha en Cajamarca.
The Yanacucha mine has destroyed our water sources and drained our lakes. Our water has turned an orange color, and there is cadmium, lead, and arsenic.
Maxima's land provides direct access to additional gold and copper deposits in the surrounding plateaus. Newmont plans to drain Laguna Azul and 3 other lakes to develop a new mine called Conga. Maxima stands in the way of billions of dollars of gold and copper on this mountaintop.
Vinieron a pedir un diálogo la empresa que...
They came and asked me to sell them my land. But that's an absurd idea. I will never sell it.
When the offer to buy the land didn't work, the mining company tried to evict Maxima, claiming that she and her husband were not legitimate owners.
Entonces ahí...
I stepped out with the title to my land and I said, "Gentlemen, there are no grounds to kick me out. My husband and I bought this land with the sweat off our backs." I was crying and I said, "Please don't do this to me. Where am I supposed to go?" I was attacked by the police and the company's security team.
When Maxima's daughter tried to stop them, the two were beaten and left unconscious.
La empresa minera los denuncia además con unos argumentos.
The mining company made up some ridiculous charges. They accused them of being illegal squatters on their own land. Then they took them to court.
The court punished Maxima and her husband with a suspended prison sentence of nearly 3 years and fined them almost $2,000. Maxima appealed and used the verdict to galvanize community support.
Muchos de ustedes, compañeros, saben cómo yo he sufrido, cómo yo he enfrentado a la empresa minera y levantarnos a una sola voz de protesta y decir que se vaya la minería de nuestro país.
Local citizens organized themselves as the guardians of the lakes, camping on Maxima's land to protect her and Laguna Azul. After 2 years of appeals, the courts overturned Maxima's prison sentence and stopped her eviction. This legal victory stalled Newmont's development of the Conga mine.
Y cuando mi abogada dijo,
When my lawyer told me they ruled in our favor, I was thrilled because I thought the conflict was finally over and I would be able to live at peace again on my land.
Maxima's bravery has been recognized throughout Latin America. She received a special award from Peru's National Coordinator for Human Rights for her activism.
pero fue peor.
But now things are worse because they won't leave us alone, not even for 1 second. They literally have my house surrounded. They've even built a fence around it. But I will never kneel before Yanacocha, and I am never going to give up. No way.
For outstanding environmental achievement for South and Central America, the 2016 Goldman Environmental Prize is awarded to Maxima Acuña, Cajamarca, Peru.
Thank you. So this video just shows part of the struggles, and I was, as I was just saying, this week, a Colombian indigenous leader, her name is Sandra Peña, she was also assassinated, and she was the governor. So not even the lives of indigenous peoples are particularly a target because of the racism inherited from colonial times. In Latin America, indigenous communities are the left behind of the left behind. So those lives really are not in the headlines, are not in the news, and they are those who are putting their lives in the front lines.
Maria, thank you. This is really powerful stuff, and I know that there are a few questions and comments coming up. Before we go to those, just to finally, I want to just ask you two things. One, what can we learn from the indigenous communities, from yourselves, about about our relationship with creation, and what can we do? Are there any things that we can do here in the UK?
Sure. So I think that one, again, trying to link climate change and speaking from my perspective, from Latin America, from Abya Yala, I think that something else changed with colonization, apart from the exploitation of the land. I think that we also, like a disconnection between the land also took place. So the indigenous communities who used to live in Abya Yala, it is estimated that they were around 6 million people, and 56 million were killed in those centuries. So we are talking about the bigger genocide in history. So those people used to have a relationship with the land that was very different from the one that we have now. So for them, the land doesn't belong to people. Actually, people belong to the land. Their perspective of the earth, and many theologians argue that the earth should be called Mother Earth, because to the earth we can sell, we can destroy, we can exploit, we can buy, because it's just earth. But to the mother, with the mother we have love, and there is care, and there is respect. So we don't sell it, we don't kill it, we don't exploit it, we don't buy it, because it's our mother, and we only have one mother. So that even that Mother Earth reflects the kind of relationship that indigenous communities have with the land. And those remaining indigenous communities that are still living and fighting and resisting historically in the Amazon forest, in the Andean communities, in those reserves, actually I believe that they have a gem that can be really powerful for us in other more urbanized and Western societies, because we are looking for alternatives, and they do have an alternative. But the alternative goes beyond than recycling the bottles. Actually, the alternative is shifting our mindset and coming to see creation just as God creating in the beginning. We are soil, as the land is, so everything is soil, and we are part of that too. So is discovering our shared interconnection and interdependence that we have with the earth and with the land and with the rivers, because somehow there is the divine footprint of God is present in the river, and the river is alive, is present in the tree, and the tree is alive. So it's not, I think that the indigenous communities see that divine, understood that divine footprint is present much broader and deeper and stronger than we do understand it. So I think that these are part of the things that we need to pick up, we need to learn, we need to try to incorporate that and embrace that for us. And in terms of theology, and because we are Christians, I think that there is another step that we need to do. We learned that indigenous communities were wrong because they are pantheists, and because they worship the moon, and they worship the land, and they worship the sun, and we wanted to evangelize. And this is also what happened in colonial times. So we destroyed their traditions without understanding them. And actually now I believe that as Christian, it is okay to rediscover, it is okay to try to listen, it is okay to try to learn, and it is okay to try to build bridges between, because they don't win, the indigenous communities don't win or lose with that, but we are losing the opportunity to discover the Indian face of God that is actually expressed through the spirituality of these indigenous communities. And if we go to the scientific facts, actually, the land that is protected by indigenous communities is actually contributing hugely to fight. They are like carbon sinks. So the land that is protected by those indigenous communities that we often neglect are being the what helps the world to breathe and to heal.
Thank you so much, Maria. So much for us to consider and think about there. And I think lots of us will be reflecting on this for quite a while to come. There are some questions that have come through. Many are just saying, first of all, thank you for sharing your perspective. It's so important that we learn from your perspective. So we're really grateful that you have come. I have a question here from Robert. How much of, for example, deforestation and land exploitation, mining, destruction in Ecuador and Latin America is driven by the consumer economics of the wealthy nations? And if this were to end suddenly, what would be the impact socially and economically on the poorer countries?
This is a very good question, because when we talk about exploitation in any sense, it's not only an issue that affects the environment. Actually, it's a social issue. So most of the exploitation that is taking place in our countries goes outside our countries. So I don't have the percentages in my head, and I suppose that it will also depend on the kind of industry. So if we are talking about the petrol, or if we are talking about the wood, but because who pays more is people outside. So there is a lot of interest and a lot of trafficking alongside that. But in terms of the impact, what would happen if we suddenly stop? Let me share with you a case that I get to know because of my work in Tirfan in Cajamarca. Cajamarca is where this video comes from, the video from the woman and this big mine. So those environmentalists, there were huge march and huge demonstration, because really the hole is really, really big, and you can see it from Cajamarca. You see up in the mountain, and you see the hole, and the affectation, yes, in the waters is there. But also you can see that there are many wealthy people in Cajamarca, and many people that I met were saying, actually, the mining, this mine is good because it gave us work. It gave us, before we didn't have work. Now many people were employed by the mine. So because it was a legal mine, in this case, it was a legal mine. So many people had work because they were the drivers, because they were those who go to the mine. So some people got enriched, at least a little bit, because of the mine. So for them, their view of the mine was quite positive, because there were more restaurants, there were more, like the economy was boosted because of the mine. So for me, it was a struggle, because on one side, I know that the mine is not good, but when I hear and when I speak with a lot of people, they say actually the mine is not that bad. And yes, it creates some damages, but actually there are many protections. But then I continued to dig, and actually I found out another very interesting things. Because of the mine, yes, it is true that there was more money circulating in Cajamarca, and there were restaurants and hotels and everything. But in the same time, the bridge, the gap between the social gap between the rich and the poor in Cajamarca became bigger, even more bigger, because not everyone was employed by the mine. So if you wanted to be employed by the mine, you still needed to have basic education, hopefully English, because these were foreign mines. So who were left behind? Again, the indigenous communities, again, those who were already left behind for 5 centuries, 500 years. So the social gap is now big in Cajamarca, because some people were able to get rich because of the mine, but many other people were left behind because of the mine. So there are not only affectations in terms of the environment, but also the social, economic, political, and cultural. So I think that it's very complex. And I don't think that the solution is living tomorrow. I think that there are many other things beyond the environment that we need to take into consideration.
Thank you, Maria. And that's the key, isn't it? It is a complex issue. It's not something that we can solve simply. I've got 2 more questions that I'm going to ask you before we close. The first one's from Richard. Richard says that you mentioned the increased impact of flood events, but Richard's also wondering about water scarcity. Is that becoming a problem in Ecuador? It's conscious of the rapid recession and increasing cases, the complete disappearance of mountain glaciers in the Andes.
Yes. However, it's very localized. So and this is the thing. So in some places you have the floodings, another places you have the droughts. So in Ecuador, there are places where you may lack of water, but thankfully, at least for now, even if the glaciers are melting, and this is painful to see. So our big glaciers that were full of snow years before, now they are I don't know if my kids are going to see, of the kids of my kids are going to know these mountains with the snow, because it may not be there. But in Ecuador we still have I don't know the word in English, but the paramo, the high places in the mountains. We have a lot of paramos, where the water is born. So we still have water in Ecuador. However, for example, in Central America, there is this dry corridor, and the dry corridor that goes from Mexico through Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, even to some parts of Costa Rica. This dry corridor is one of the pockets of poverty, because there is no water, and it's becoming, it was like a normal phenomenon, natural phenomenon. There were times in the year where people knew that there was going to be lack of water, but now these periods of time are becoming longer. So longer and more frequent and more unpredictable. So there is a lot of people, big percentage of people in Central America that live in this dry corridor. They depend on agriculture. They are already struggling, fighting poverty. And then with climate change, this is becoming worse. So when we see, for example, the caravans that are going to the United States, that I suppose that you follow up a little bit in the news, it's not people that are leaving their countries because they like the US, they want to go to Disney. They are fighting poverty. They are been fighting this for years, and they don't see opportunities, because things are just getting worse. So you can Google that, the dry corridor in Central America, and you can see some of the effects of climate change there.
Thank you, Maria. One last question, simply to ask, what can we pray for? What would you like us in our churches and individuals to take back to our churches in points for prayer?
Thank you very much, and this is very, very important. I appreciate that you are giving some time to try to learn what is going on in our continent, in our beautiful Abya Yala, our living land and mature land. So just trying to understand what is going on, trying to see beyond what we usually see, trying to listen to those voices that are usually hidden and silenced, like these indigenous voices, indigenous communities, many women, because from the indigenous, I believe that there is a lot about the women indigenous fights and fight for resistance and also fight for life. So just first be informed and your willingness to learn more. The second one is trying to find organizations that are supporting and journeying with this kind of people. So Peace and Hope, Paz y Esperanza, which is one organization that has something also in the UK. I know they are doing a big work supporting and fighting alongside indigenous communities, especially in the Amazon forest, which now the numbers of deforestation are increasing hugely. Just in March, last March, was the worst month in 10 years. So this is not in the headlines. So being informed, trying to support organizations that are working on this, pray for us. If you can, if you have a chance to share stories, let other people know. This is a huge help. And the other thing, in terms of our spirituality as Christians, just be open to be transformed by the theological narratives and the hermeneutics and the theologies and the spirituality from indigenous communities, because there is so much that we can learn, and there is so much that we can also challenge our own lifestyle just by understanding how they lived out their spirituality, how the indigenous communities live out their spirituality, and how this led them to fight for the earth, the Mother Earth, and to resist climate change.
Maria, I think I speak for us all when we're incredibly grateful that you've come along to share your perspective and your stories and give us such a fascinating and sobering insight into life in Latin America. Maria is going to be staying with us for the afternoon. She's going to join a workshop and join us later. But if you want to read more from Maria, she has got a chapter also in Hannah Malcolm's book, Words for a Dying World. She's written a chapter in there, which is a fascinating chapter and well worth reading. But just again, thank you so much, Maria, for taking time to come today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I'm happy to, as I will be around to chat or whatever, I will be here. Thank you very much.